Okay, so in this video, we are going to be using AWS S3 buckets as a place to store any user uploaded images. So that means any profile picture or project image from now on will no longer be stored in our Django application. This will be sent up into an Amazon Web Services S3 bucket, and we'll cover what that is in a minute. But this bucket will store all these images, and then we're just going to connect that to our Django project. So we're basically going to have an external URL, and that's what's going to serve any image. So let's go ahead and just recap how this currently works. So I want to do a refresher from our static files video earlier in the course. And basically we have two models here that have a field called image field. So this image field right here, which is on our project model and our profile model, this image field takes in an image file. So when a user submits this, in settings.py, we configure something called media root. So media root just says, hey, go into static here. So go into our static folder and then upload that into images. So this is the current path, and that's where all images get sent. Well, I also talked about in that video how Django wasn't good to serve static files in production. Django technically can do this in development here, but in production, it's too much for Django to store this many static files. So we used a library called white noise, and that was being tested when we set debug to false. And then all our static files stopped working. So any CSS and JavaScript stopped working. And then we use something called white noise to help us out with that. Well, we're going to use white noise to still serve up CSS and JavaScript files. We could do this from AWS, but white noise is going to take care of that still. So we don't need to worry about CSS and JavaScript static files. But these images, we're going to change this so it doesn't get uploaded here. So no images get uploaded into this folder anymore. Those are sent into AWS. So if we have thousands of users, you can just imagine how busy this folder can get, and we would just really overwhelm our Django application. So we're going to start connecting that to an S3 bucket. So what is an S3 bucket? So we just used AWS earlier, and we set up our RDS, so our Postgres database instance, and that's on AWS now. An S3 bucket is simply another service that AWS provides. So you can think of an S3 bucket like a bucket to store any kind of folder or images. It kind of compares to Dropbox, not as a service, but Dropbox is a place where you can just upload any kind of files, and it's just a place to store it. So in this case, go ahead and just search up S3 here, and you're going to find this service here. So it's another awesome service that AWS provides, and it's pretty simple to work with. So in this case, all we need to do is create a bucket, and a bucket is a place that stores our images or any files. So we'll create a bucket, and let's just go ahead and give it a name. So this bucket name does have to be unique. So let's just do dev search dash bucket, and let's just go ahead and click create. So by default, it's going to give me the closest region to my area. So I think Virginia is probably the closest to me at this point. I'm in Florida, and let's go ahead and turn off block all public access. So we could have private buckets where no one else will be able to view this, but in this case, we are trying to serve images inside of a public application. So in order to view these, we do want to make sure these are public. So we're going to turn that off, and then we're just acknowledging that, yeah, we know that this is going to be public. So there's a lot of different configurations that we can do here, but in this case, we want these available. So that's going to be it. And I don't think I need to do anything here. So let's just go ahead and do create bucket. So at this point, this is our bucket. We'll open this up, and we can take in any picture and drag that in here. So let's just go to upload, and I just want to show you a demo of how this works. So we can go into add file here, and let's just go into Django 2021 file. So I'll just find something from my desktop, and let's just take this picture. So if I open that, that's going to upload it. We'll just hit upload like that, and that's going to take a second. And here we go. So we have this link here. So if I click on this link, let's see, so I have to click on the actual URL. So if I click on this object URL, in theory, we should be able to see this image. Well, at this point, this image is still set to private. Our bucket is technically public, but the image itself is set to private. So we're going to do something where we can configure every single item in our bucket and make that public. So at this point, what I could do is I can actually go to an individual item here, and I just want to go slow through this process so you can actually see all the steps here and how you can customize it. So let's go in here, and we can do object actions, and we can click on make public right here. So if I click make public, this is going to make this specific file in the bucket public. So the bucket is public, but the files are still set to private. So I could click on make public. And now if I go to this URL here, or if I go to the bucket again, and then go to that specific item, so we'll find that picture, and then let's go into the object URL. So if I click on this, now I can see that image. So we go into the bucket name. And by the way, if you had an issue naming that bucket, just find a name that's completely unique. So that URL does have to be unique. And then we're going to see our bucket name, S3 Amazon Web Services, and then the image name. So this is publicly available. This is a link that I can send to anybody in the world. So before we connect this to our Django project, what I want to do is make sure that any image from now on that we upload is publicly available. So we actually had to go into this picture and then make it public. But what if users are uploading pictures? We're not going to ask them to log into AWS or have to, go and make all their images public. So we don't have to do this, or we don't want to have to do this every time. So we don't want to go into object actions and then make public. So for this, we have something called a bucket policy that we can set. So if we go into permissions, we can write a policy that's basically going to be your configuration for the entire bucket and the images or items inside of this bucket. So we already know the bucket is public, but down here, we have something called a bucket policy. So if we go into here, I think we can actually go into a policy generator. So what it's going to do is allow us to set our permissions for our buckets, and it's going to generate a policy like this. So you might have to look up a bucket policy generator. It's somewhere here. I think it's an edit, and then we can go into policy generator. So instead of doing that, I actually have one ready for you. So let's go into our project and go into your resources folder. So this is inside of the GitHub repo, and there is something called bucket policy. So go ahead and copy all of this. This is a policy already pre-generated. And let's just go ahead and paste this right here. So we're going to paste that in here. And this is a bucket that's basically going to make any image available here. So all we're going to do here is change the bucket name. So in resource, we want to use dev search -bucket or whatever you call this. So make sure this is your bucket name, not my bucket name. A lot of people will follow this directly and then run into issues. So dev search -bucket, and that's it. So in this case, any GET request can get this. So we're not giving people write access to our buckets. We're just giving them GET request access. So now if I save this, let's go ahead and save that bucket policy. Let's test this. So if I go back into this bucket here, so we'll go back to our objects. If I upload another one here, we'll go ahead and get another image. And let's just throw this diagram in for MVT. So I hope this is making sense. It's just a place to store files. Just again, imagine Dropbox if you use that. Something, I guess, familiar to a lot of people. So we'll go ahead and go into our bucket now. So in our bucket, we see MVT. And when I go to this, if I go to that URL, because of that bucket policy, I didn't have to make this image publicly available. So that was already set for me. So let's go ahead and actually connect this to our Django project. So with Django, we have a third-party package called Storages in Boto 3. And this is going to allow us to go into our Django settings.py file and actually connect Django. So anytime a user uploads something, this goes into AWS. So we're not having to manually drag images in here. So let's go ahead and take care of that. And really quick, in the last video, we took care of our database. I actually reverted back to my SQLite database. If you use Postgres, stick to that. I did this just because I already have data here. So I just use that. I removed my passwords and so on. So I'm just trying to hide information. And my email, obviously, I just put in some kind of empty string there. So we're going to look up Django Storages and Boto 3. So let's just do Django Storages. And this is that library. So in here, we're going to select S3 here, and we're going to go ahead and connect this. So this is just a library that allows us to connect to it. Let's go into installation. So let's see. I actually remember the command. I can't find it in the documentation. It should be somewhere here in installation. So usage. And let's just go back. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and type this in. So we'll go ahead and go into our terminal. So let's open that up. And we're going to do pip install Django-storages. So it's somewhere in the docs, but I remember what the command was, so we'll just write that in. So storages like that. So I have to do python-m, so we'll just do python-m pip install Django-storages. Okay, so that's going to get this installed for us. And we also want to do pip install, and I have to do python-m. So python-m pip install Boto 3. So this works with storages. So we have those two installed. Did I just do Boto 2? That's supposed to be 3. And I'm just going to do CLS really quickly because I keep seeing an issue and I'm not sure what's happening. And okay, I kept hitting 3, but it kept outputting 2, so maybe I was wrong. So Boto 3 is installed. That must have been my mistake. So that's ready, and now we want to configure it. So in order to connect this, we have to go into settings.py and we have to add in storages inside of installed apps. So just like Core's headers and our REST framework, we're just going to do storages. And there we go. So that's connected. So I can put this technically anywhere inside of my Django project. I think it may have to be underneath this, but I'm not 100% on that. So let's just add it at the bottom of settings.py. We are going to have to set some variables. So the first one is we can connect default file storages. And if we do this one right here, this one at the top, this is going to configure for our S3 buckets. Now, if we use this one right here, so static file storages, so we have default storages and static file storages. This means that anytime we run that collect static command, all these static files will be uploaded into S3. Well, in this case, I already have white noise for that, so I don't have to do that. So we're just going to copy this one, and let's go back here and let's just paste this at the bottom. So this means that we are now going to upload our static files into an S3 bucket. Now, in order to make this work, we also have to add in a few more things here. So Django still has no way of knowing what bucket we're trying to connect to. So we just told it, okay, we're using an S3 bucket, but where are you trying to upload this stuff to? So in this case, we are going to go back into S3 here or into AWS, and we're going to use another service called IAM. So we'll just do IAM, and IAM stands for Identity Access Management, I believe. And this is where we can create users that have different parts or different access to different parts of our AWS account. So in this case, we want to create a user just for our S3 bucket. So let's go into users and we're going to generate a new user. I'm going to delete this information. There's going to be some sensitive data in here, and I just want to make sure that we remove this after. So this will not be live, I guess, after the fact or after this video, but yeah, that's just to make sure that nobody tries to hack my accounts here. So we'll do add user, and I'm just going to say Dennis Ivy for my username, and we're going to give this user programmatic access. So that means with this user can actually modify things in our AWS account. So we'll just go ahead and hit next here. We want to attach a permission. So in this case, we have all these different services that we can allow a user to access. I'm just going to search for S3 here. So we'll just do S3 like that. And here we go, Amazon S3 full access. So this means this user has full access to our AWS S3 buckets. So I'll click next here. Let's go ahead and not add anything in here. And now we should have a user created, or we're ready to have a user created. So let's go ahead and hit create user. And here we go. So our user was created. So what we need is access to this access key and then the secret key here. So I'm going to show it to you right now. We're going to use access key here, or we're going to use this key. Do not show this to anyone. So this will either be put in your environment variables or any way that you want to hide it. Don't show people this key. This will be deleted after. So if I scroll down here and follow the instructions on how to connect to an S3 bucket, we see AWS access key. So let's go ahead and take this. Let's go into our settings.py file and let's just set this. So we want to get the access key. So we'll go back here and let's get this access key. So we'll copy that and we want to paste that in here in a string. So now when we're uploading something, we know that we're using the S3 buckets. We have a user and we also want the secret key. We'll paste that down here, set that to equals here, and then we'll assign that to this secret key. So we'll copy that and we'll paste that right here. So now this user has permissions to access the bucket, and the next thing we want to do is actually assign a bucket. So even though the user has access, we still want to know, hey, what bucket are we uploading this to? Because we can have multiple buckets. So we'll set the bucket name, and this bucket was called, let's see, so we don't need our IAM user anymore. So let's go back into services, and I know the bucket name, but I just want to show you where to get that just in case. So we'll go in here, and then we see dev search -bucket. So we're taking this name right here, and we're throwing that in here, so in a string value. So now when we upload this, Django knows exactly where to send it. So use this user, access this account, and send images in here. So if I save that, let's go ahead and try this. So let's refresh this really quick. And now that breaks our images. So this is trying to set a path to AWS, but it can't find it anymore. So let's go ahead and try to update a picture here. So we'll log into an account. You can do this from the admin panel. Let's just try to update my my profile picture. So we'll just go ahead and go into choose files here, and we'll go into Django 2021. We'll just find one of the original profile pictures, and let's just take this one. So if I take that picture and hit submit, let's see. So that picture is now showing. Now, if I open up the image URL, look at the URL. So this is now inside of DevSearch bucket profiles, and we see this picture. So this is no longer in my Django application. This is up on a live server, and this is publicly available. So if I refresh this, we're going to see that image appear here. So in that file path, we told it to upload into profile. So it created a folder, and dennis.jpg is now here. So this is a public image. So what I want to do is I actually want to get rid of this access key right here. So I just want to remove that extra string here. So for this, we have a variable here called auth query string somewhere down here. So let's see, AWS auth query string. So by default, this is set to true. So that means that it's going to access or add on this extra query. And that's useful for different scenarios, but we're not going to worry about that right now. I just want to get rid of that. So in this case, I'm just going to throw that above here, and we'll set this to false. So we're saying do not add that string here. So I'm going to save this, and I actually have to re-upload this image to remove that, I believe. So let's try this one more time. So if I open up image URL, that is still there. So that's like saved as a snapshot in the database of the actual image URL. So let's go ahead and copy this, and let's just upload the same picture again. So we'll submit it. Let's close that out, and let's open up the image URL. So if I check that out here, there we go. So it's in that bucket, and we see the file path. So that looks a lot cleaner. So another thing that I wanted to address here is if we upload the same pictures here. So what if we upload an image with the same URL? So right now this picture is called dennis.jpg. What happens when I upload the same picture? So let's just go into AWS. I accidentally closed that out here. So we'll go into sign in. I should be signed in already. Let's go into that S3 bucket, and let's just see what happened because we uploaded this image twice. So if I go into profiles, it just overrid that original picture. So we only have one dennis.jpg. Now this is up to you and how you want to handle this, but instead of overwriting it, there are some cases where it's useful to make a copy of it and then add in like an extra string. So I'm going to leave this completely up to you, but in the documentation, there's a variable called AWS file overwrite, and that means if an image has the same name, set it to true. Now in one case that I can think of, if I want this to be false here, is if somebody uploads a generic name. So what if you uploaded a picture of waterfalls and then another user uploads the same picture or a different picture but the same name? Now what's going to happen is that picture is going to get overridden, and you're going to see someone else's picture because it's accessing the same bucket and the same file name. So let's try this again. So we'll go in here and we'll set AWS file overwrite, and we're going to set that to false. So we're saying do not overwrite the files, just add in a different URL. So in this case, we're just going to use this in the same picture, but let's just go ahead and hit enter here, and we'll just do choose file, select the same image. Whoops. So let me just move this out of the way, and we'll just double click that actually. So once I double click it and submit it, if we go to the bucket, so if I actually open up this image URL, this should be Dennis, and then it adds in this string here. So that just makes sure that it's unique. So we uploaded the same picture, so we still get the same picture twice, and now it has that extra string. Again, that's useful if you have users with the same file name. What if we have another person named Dennis with a file named dennis.jpg? We don't want their picture removing ours. So that's it for this video, and you probably didn't do this, but I did revert back to my SQLite database just because I already had data there. You probably didn't do this, but if you did, we are going to move on to deploying this application. So I actually want to have my database connected to a live database. So I'm going to go ahead and revert back to this here, comment out SQLite. Again, you probably didn't do this, but I just want to show you this so you're not confused and why things are different. So I'm going to re-enter my information, connect to that database. on AWS RDS, so that Postgres database. And in the next video, we are finally going to deploy our application on Heroku. So the database is on AWS. The images are also on AWS here. Our other static files are served up by white noise. So any CSS or JavaScript are using white noise. And we pretty much have our application ready to serve up to the world to see. So we're going to have a live domain, and then you can use this link and share it with anybody.